I'd like to thank Vesalius College, where Joe Koops is based, for their support of this workshop. So I think I will leave it to the editors of the book to explain what the project was all about, introduce it, and then we will start in on some of the meat of the session. Anyway, welcome to you all.
It's a great pleasure to be here and to, of course, launch the book, but also talk a little bit about the substance and the conclusions, and also hopefully go a bit further in the discussion on the EU as a diplomatic actor, which is, of course, an emerging research field that will gain even more relevance and will become very interesting, of course, now with changeovers at the External Action Service. It's also great to see so many experts and veterans on EU diplomacy, Jeffrey Edwards from Cambridge and David Spencer in the audience, and it's bound to be quite an interesting discussion. So we'll try to keep it very, very short, mostly because we want to have discussion, but really because we want you to buy the book, so we don't want to give you too much from the chapters. What I'm going to quickly do with Jovelyn is outline some of the key approaches and some of the key findings, but we then go, of course, more into much more detail. Karen's chapter on human rights is an extraordinary one, and Mike, of course, very great overview on diplomacy, so I'll leave it to them. The departure was really some time ago, as it is with publishing. It was 2012. We organized a lecture series in Brussels where all these speakers took part in, and it was really a question of assessing at the beginning, 2 years after the establishment of the External Action Service, of where is diplomacy going. And it links in conceptually and theoretically, of course, with the all-important foreign policy question of the EU as an international actor, which of course has gained traction since the 1970s already. Floods of publications and articles have come out about it. Is there actorness of the EU distinct from its member states? And if so, has it impact? Where is it going? And so on. Diplomacy, of course, has been the kind of neglected stepchild of this entire literature, even though there were really early attempts. Mike Smith co-authored an article already, I think, in the late 70s. Chris Hill, Chris Hill also touching very early on in the 70s on this issue. The creation of the External Action Service then created a flood of articles that looked on the institutional side of the EU. Can this new body and this new institutional framework deliver what many external spectators and to a large extent also partner countries expected from the EU to deliver, to really bring together the cloud of its economic, political and soft power instruments in really promoting diplomatic approaches. Now is a good time to look back on it, because of course the service is now rotating. Catherine Ashton has ended her term. It's interesting to see, we have a chapter also on the EU's approach to Iran, that her legacy for the EU lives on, because of course now she was nominated to carry on the negotiations for the EU on Iran, which is quite, you can interpret it in either way, but it's at least a kind of late vindication of one of the success stories, in a sense, or at least intermediate potential success stories of the EU's diplomatic approach, the kind of semi-breakthrough in the negotiations with Iran. The service will change most certainly under Mogherini. What we try to do in the book is to give a kind of framework that cuts the black box of the EU as a diplomatic actor into the different levels. So we look, of course, how the member states influence the EU as a diplomatic actor. It's not just about the bureaucracy and the institution. Key member states influence, of course, the direction and impact of the EU. Then we looked at the bureaucratic level, we looked at the international level, and at the individual level. We had a chapter by Fernando Gomales, who's also the keynote speaker today on TTIP, but before he led substantively the diplomatic outreach campaign of the EU to gain an enhanced observer status in the General Assembly. Students of the EU might know this. The first attempt was not so successful. It was also a kind of important lesson to see that there's a lot of resistance amongst other regional organizations in the UN system to accord the EU a special kind of status, and the second attempt of that outreach campaign then succeeded. And it shows also a kind of level of flexibility you have to have, and a level of in-depth outreach and key individuals in order to pull off a diplomatic campaign, but it also showed the extra added value of the External Action Service. I'm sure we need far more studies on the External Action Service to really assess its impact, but it can already be shown, and Pierre Vimont wrote a short foreword for the book where he kind of took his conclusions from his service as the Executive Secretary General of the EAS, that at least there is a sense of cultural shift as a result of the Commission no longer being exclusively in charge of foreign policy, mostly defined through development policies, economic policies, and trade policies, and that the addition of the External Action Service at least puts into the orbit the question of whether the EU wants to become a more political actor. And that includes also making, in a sense, tough choices, as he calls it, and make realistic choices that transforms the EU no longer into a paymaster that tries to keep friends everywhere and strategic partners all around the world, but where you have to make tough choices, and that example of Russia right now and the approach towards Russia could be a forebearer of some things to come.